Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with another presentation looking at the context to Mao's rise to power within the CCP. I think it's interesting, and I think it's important to know where Mao was coming from, and so I'm taking a little time to do so. As we've seen, with the Northern Expedition successfully underway, a showdown was coming. For Chiang Kai-shek, the Northern Expedition, though ostensibly to crush the warlords, always had an equally important second aim: to smash the communists. The Kuomintang was looking more like two parties in one, with the right and the left at odds with and suspicious of each other. The communists, reluctant partners at the outset, had grafted the Trojan horse strategy onto the Comintern's bloc within, and the Russians, though still maintaining that the united front was the best way to ensure revolution, were beginning to see its limitations. But for Chiang, the front's success in defeating the warlords reduced any need for it, whilst the successes of the peasant associations pointed to an alternative way forward for the communists. In March 1927, the left in the Kuomintang took control of the party and agreed to support the peasants' struggle. But the first signs of the way in which events would unfold came in February 1927, when, with the National Revolutionary Army, the NRA, closing in on Shanghai, the labour unions, led by Zhou Enlai, who was to be Mao's right-hand man through most of his time in power, declared a general strike. But the army, rather than coming to the support of the strikers, allowed the commander of the garrison in Shanghai to butcher their leaders, mostly communists, beheading them on the spot and displaying their heads on poles to strike fear amongst the strikers. Chiang now took every opportunity in areas he controlled to systematically attack the left. The counter-revolution had started. With Chiang having secured his military position vis-à-vis the warlords, and having won the backing of the wealthy bourgeoisie of Shanghai, on the understanding that the communists would be dealt with, felt he was in a position to do without the support of the Soviet Union, and finally rid himself of his unwanted communist allies. Thus, in April 1927, when the NRA entered Shanghai, though they were welcomed as liberators, they were unleashed on those who had been their allies. Chiang's troops attacked the communist headquarters, as well as trade unions, and rooted out and shot some 5,000 communists and sympathizers. The action virtually destroyed not only the Communist Party in China's largest city, but the workers' movement as a whole. The Communist Party and their Comintern advisers were in disarray, unsure how to respond. A bourgeois revolution, before a revolution of the peasantry and workers, was still the preference of the Comintern. However, others saw this as a betrayal of peasants and workers. In truth, both the Comintern advisers and the communist leadership were split on how to respond. Meanwhile, the assault, which was to last until 1930, was extended anywhere the Kuomintang forces were able to reach, and it included the peasant associations in the countryside, which were utterly destroyed. It was a brutal campaign, with hundreds of thousands killed. Communists were executed, and there were horrific assaults on the peasantry, that included disemboweling, gouging out eyes, cutting out tongues, and abuse of women. It was a determined attempt to achieve that second of Chiang's aims in instigating the Northern Expedition to smash the communists. Stalin now urged the Chinese to adopt a more radical stance, to end all links with Chiang and to recruit peasants and workers into the Kuomintang Party in order to form a reliable army of their own and to lead the agrarian revolution. Moscow still wanted the United Front to hold, though without Chiang. It all served to show just how out of touch Stalin was with the conditions in China. The communists were no longer in any position to dictate to the Kuomintang how their party should be run. Chiang's attempt to smash the CCP almost succeeded. The CCP was almost wiped out, its organizational structure broken, its ranks decimated. The communists were physically splintered into three groups: the party leadership, who continued the battle from Shanghai, which would become the headquarters of the CCP, those who continued the fight in the countryside amongst the peasantry, for example Mao, and Moscow and the Comintern, with representatives of the Comintern on the ground in China. Each was committed to the cause. Each wanted a socialist revolution. Each was brave. All this is beyond question. But each would have a different perspective on what was unfolding in China. And we can add another ingredient: fiercely strong personalities and their delicate egos. So, as each pushed their favoured policies, their favoured tactics, the direction the revolution would take was constantly uncertain. Moscow, Shanghai and Mao could not agree on whether the CCP should play the leading role or whether they should play a supportive role, supporting insurrections initiated by peasants in the countryside or workers in the towns. Another key issue that was fiercely debated was whether the revolution should focus primarily on the workers and on taking control of towns, or would the revolution succeed first in the countryside? And what tactics should their armies adopt? Should they disperse and conduct a flexible guerrilla campaign, or should they consolidate their forces and build bases from which the revolution could spread? And these fierce debates were conducted as the White Terror raged around them, and as they suffered terrible setbacks. The most critical lesson learned was the importance of military power if political objectives were to be achieved. So grew the Maoist maxim, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. Mao also concluded that they should consolidate the revolution in the areas where strong mass movements had been developed by communists during the Northern Expedition. This would require a strong Communist Party to organize the peasantry and lead them, and a Red Army to defend them. But it could be done. But such conclusions only put him at odds with the party leadership and with Moscow, or at least at first. The CCP's Sixth Party Congress, which took place in October 1928 in Moscow, it was deemed too dangerous to hold it in China, concluded that China was still in the midst of a bourgeois revolution, and so the party's historic task was to rid China of the imperialists, destroy the landlord system, and set up Soviets so as to give peasants and workers the experience of government, and so lay the groundwork for the socialist revolution that would surely follow. Military power was accepted as critically important, and so the Red Army was seen as the central issue. The peasantry was seen to hold the most revolutionary potential, and it was agreed that guerrilla tactics should be adopted in order to establish Soviets. So we see that the United Front had failed the communists. Mao is still not a leading force in the party, but his arguments were being heard and to some extent acted on. But the odds were stacked against the communists. We will see in my next 2 episodes how Mao developed his ideas and how he came to be the leading force in the party. This really is important context, and I hope you found it interesting as well as useful. If you haven't already done so, do please subscribe to my channel and tell your friends about it too. Make me feel wanted. But for now, let me thank you for listening and wish you the best of luck with your studies. Cheers.